Welcome back to the $1 million Tipping Point podcast. Today we have Tiffany Charles on the line. What am I, like in the 60s on the interview? It's going to be fun. I can already tell. All right. This podcast episode is brought to you by My Business, Corporate to Contract, the place to go if you have corporate or office experience. You want to take the skills you have and become your own boss of your own life, of your own schedule, all that good stuff. And if you love the podcast, don't forget to sign up for the Tipping Jar of Wisdom, our newsletter. You get exclusive content from people like Tiffany every Thursday straight to your inbox on how to grow your business. Connect with me on Instagram at Virtually Kiri or LinkedIn, Kiri Mohan. Sign up through all my bios. All right, Tiffany, here we go. Tiffany is primarily responsible for firm growth and leading a talented team at Destiny Capital in the areas of business development, client experience, professional relationships, specialty markets, and marketing. With 13 years of experience in the financial services industry and another 5 in commercial real estate, Tiffany has experienced and planned for many forms of success, entrepreneurship, and wealth creation. In addition to her work at Destiny Capital, Tiffany is also a well-respected coach and leader in the financial service industry. So welcome, Tiffany, again. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I saw, your bio just briefly touches on what you're doing. It talks about Destiny Capital, but then I saw you're also with Entrepreneur Aligned. You started that business or maybe co-started that business. But then in your bio says you're also a coach. So I didn't find anything on that. Can you go into your businesses a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So Destiny Capital and Entrepreneur Aligned are actually one business. Entrepreneur Aligned is a DBA, so doing business as, purely from a marketing perspective. So it's wealth management and wealth that focuses in on entrepreneurs who are choosing to build their wealth very differently because they're taking bets on themselves and typically building it through their business, where 91% of the population is earning their wealth through more traditional means of liquid public market investing, through 401ks, brokerage accounts, those types of things. And so those two audiences really have very different financial planning needs. And so we have teams built that specialize in working with two very specific types of clients. Destiny Capital focuses in on 50 plus nearing retirement and in retirement clients, and has an entire team, client service model and experience and everything that really specializes in serving those that are nearing retirement and in retirement. And then Entrepreneur Aligned has an entire team and entire client service experience that's built on financial planning for those that are choosing to build their wealth through their businesses. And then how do you really maximize that entrepreneurial wealth experience? It's really important because as entrepreneurs, we have a lot more complexity and opportunity in our wealth creation. And quite frankly, accessibility to wealth management hasn't been around that long for entrepreneurs, because as our industry has traditionally set fees based off of the investments that we manage in the public markets. And so Entrepreneur Aligned is a flat fee service that allows less conflict of interest to be in play, right? So that we can better serve our entrepreneurs. It's really more consultative financial planning with the opportunities that we do have in-house investment management. So if they have those accounts, then we can certainly manage those for them as well. And so it was really about how do we serve those two. And then on top of it, super passionate about mentoring advisors and being a part of the change I wanted to see in the industry, and the ways in which it's evolved. Early on, it was about product sales and commission. It's really over the years gotten into a level of planning and advice, advice. And now there's really this entire level of like experience that you really need to create in specialization, because those things have somewhat been commoditized and available along the way. And so with that, it was very sales oriented to then very technical planning oriented. And now you really need this experience and creating the IP and the advice. And I wanted to be a part of creating a culture and education in the industry. And so I was doing that in a lot of one-to-one mentoring, and then met Stephanie Bogan, and she was a private coach of mine. She's on a previous show. She's awesome. And then I got on to help her at Limitless Advisor. So we get to coach hundreds of other practice owners of wealth firms across the nation. I highly focus in on growth and how do we really create the experiences that drive a lot of value to our clients, that also create referrals, and how do you get into the digital world, and how do you create and pick a niche, because as independent firms, we're not going to be able to compete on the wide spectrum, where it's a quantity play. It's really, how do you do your very best work with the very best people and do that in a really great way. So I help firms identify who they're going to do their best work with, and then create an entire experience around that. So it's a lot, but what that did was systematize my mentoring, because as an entrepreneur, time's our greatest asset and lever. And over time, as you continue to grow and you get those experiences, definitely contributing to the women's community is really important to me, and I want to share in that. However, I have to be really thoughtful about my time. So coaching with Limitless is a very structured way that I can show and tell, share my failures, share my successes, help people not start to build from scratch, and help really good people build their firms to do better work for all of the people waiting for financial planning, because it's such a necessary, important piece of our world. So.
Yeah, I loved my interview with Stephanie. I absolutely loved it. And she introduced me to like a few people who it's been really, really helpful and great to learn from, people like you as well. But hers, if anyone's interested, was called a masterclass. I just remember I titled it a masterclass, and we'll put it in the show notes, but she blew me away with that interview. I remember putting her close to the beginning of the year of 2023, because I was like, this is a great way to start when you're like, you need that fresh start. You need someone to just motivate and inspire you. She's amazing. I really liked her. So I was kind of looking at, your Destiny Capital, and you had almost like two niches that you have right when you go onto the webpage, which is a retirement and a high net worth with complex financial needs. And that just intrigued me. I was thinking, what is considered high net worth? And what are complex financial needs?
Yeah, so those are really good questions. And I think those are, total transparency. Like, we're updating a bit because people don't know how to identify with where high net worth can be. Some people will put it in the place of you're in a non-taxable estate. And so maybe that's, $12 to $26 million plus in net worth, and then others will put themselves in there at 500,000 in net worth and those types of things. And so we recognize the fact that maybe identifying is like, you have to have the message of like, how do you identify, right, and share that. So, but complexity with financial planning is really, is there enough moving pieces on any given basis? Entrepreneurs that naturally are a lot more complex. There's a leverage that we can utilize and need to utilize, whether that's funding our businesses or investing in ourselves. There's business capital fundraising, there's business exits, there's a different level of business continuity and estate planning because our businesses. So it's really around like, is there a lot more complexity in those everyday moving pieces, and how is our financial planning impacting other things in our world? So financial planning is really about growing your wealth, minimizing your risks, thinking about your equity plays, and then being very, very clear on who you are, what you want, and what that journey how that money in that journey should show up. And so the levels of complexity there is how many things are contributing to that and pulling away, and how many levers are available to you.
Okay. Can you share with us what the high net worth is, or no?
A high net worth?
Yeah. What do you guys work with? Like, what is a high net worth? If we have listeners who are like, oh, I'm interested in working with you, but maybe I don't have that high net worth.
Yeah. And so we would start at about $1 million plus in investable assets if you're nearing retirement or in retirement. And then from an entrepreneur perspective, it really, because it's a consulting basis and it's not based on your assets under management or anything along those lines, because most likely a majority of your wealth is in your business. It's really a matter of we start at $5,000 a quarter for fee. So, where is that cost and value to you? If you're going through any major events, nearing an exit, if you're doing a business capital raise, if you are in a sustainable place where you have high levels of variable income on an annual basis, or those types of things, then we're a really, really good place to start to get the entire world put together. We kind of sit between entrepreneur and then all of those moving pieces. So attorneys, CPAs, M&A, bankers, like insurance and all of that, because we see your entire world and we know, and we have vetted all of those professionals and we know when those things need to come in play. So for instance, you might have a CPA that has done tax compliance. This is a good time of year where you're like, I feel like I overpaid taxes. Once again, it was a year to year, and tax planning is really important. We really sit in that seat of like, how do we identify multi-year tax planning opportunities for our entrepreneurs so they're really setting up for success, right? Entrepreneurship is awesome. You have a lot more tax levers that you can pull. But what happens when you want to buy that house in a year, but you just had like no income on your tax return because you had, a CPA that was able to work certain things through the business? Well, that's great there, but that makes you less awesome to a banker where you're looking to get a loan in order to do those things. So we're taking into account like, what are those goals and how do we put those together in your entire plan so that you're making really informed decisions along the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking through and even just talking with you, but looking through your website, you had like a list of like, values and all that kind of stuff. But then you had in there empathy. And I love that you work with your clients with empathy, because I think it can be so intimidating sometimes when you're looking at financial service planning and you just wonder, are they going to look at my situation as unique, or are they going to just be like, oh, just another person who has it like this, and we're just going to suggest this? It just seems like it's very customized with the company, with Destiny Capital and Entrepreneur Aligned, which I really liked. And what was great, you're talking about this like $5,000 a quarter for Entrepreneur Aligned. It starts there. But I saw on your site that was $0 was the starting point. So do you actually have entrepreneurs who come in with like, I try to think of a good example, like a lot of our audience at like $300,000 a year, or maybe they're like this awesome consultant coach or whatever, do you have people who are that low, or is it more like entrepreneurs who are really diverse in what they're doing and raising capital and a startup or even beyond a startup, right?
Yeah, our entrepreneurs are hodgepodge, which is super cool, because that was our goal in Entrepreneur Aligned, was that we're not just there at like now you have a liquidity event and every advisor is hopping out of the woods saying we can help you. Like, really, it was about how do we implement and put things in place that maybe you never want to sell your business, and we can create strategies that allow that to exist, right? And not be in a place of waiting for a liquidity event. And so we have entrepreneurs who have been 29 and sold their first company, and now they're looking at what's next. Like, we have entrepreneurs who are really sustainable at age 40 and like they now have a lot of clarity and all of that. And then we have entrepreneurs in their 60s who have now had a final exit and they're going into retirement. And so it really depends on where are you at from a level of like, will you receive full value from the services that we offer? And our next piece of that is like, how do we create that in a less just one-to-one personalized, customized way, and kind of a done with you type of way. So a one-to-many. So really getting this content out there in a bigger way. Because it's just so important. But yeah, we have entrepreneurs all over the place because we don't have any sort of minimum. It's really a matter of, for our entrepreneurs, of where are you going to receive that value at $5,000 a quarter or $20,000 a year at 300,000. Like, that's a decent percentage of your annual income. So it has to be a really high value offering. So that's why it's really important that we do one-to-one introductions, have a full conversation. Where are you going to get that value? I uncover a lot to make sure that we're the best in service of the entrepreneurs, and or if their pain points are very specific, like one-time pain points, then how do I open them up to the vetted professionals that we've worked so hard on over the last decade to get that problem solved. And so we do it in a lot of different ways. But yeah, our entrepreneurs, it's been fun because it's not about serving them in a traditional mean. It's about serving them as where they're at, investing in themselves and their business, and just creating more opportunities for them. And for women here, as women, like, funding is less available to us, and the ways in which we get funding from investors is very different. Oftentimes, when the types of questions that they'll ask are different of women, they're a lot more like scarcity based, or like what would happen if something happens to the business, where like in traditional, like men pitching businesses, like they may get more of those forecasting, like, big visionary questions, and that shifts, right? Like that's a very different story when you're talking to people who are investing money. So as women, it's really important that we're very financially aligned with self, and recognize how that could show up in our business, whether it's fundraising, whether that is, debt structures versus equity giveaways. Women have over time historically given equity and parts of their business up quicker. And so those are things that we're also a part of solving, is like, how do you really make this best for you as the entrepreneur, not become captive to what you're building, and remain in a seat of empowerment with every level of success in business. So yeah.
And what I love about what you're saying is it aligns so much with your copy and your marketing, because there are times when I've interviewed people and their copy doesn't seem to quite match what they're saying. But this is like, you're all about the personalized approach, working directly with the individual, making sure that client gets exactly what they need, what they want in their future, and how you can help them get there. And I just love it. It sounds so wonderful. And I can tell you're passionate about it.
Yes.
And I love that you're also helping women and making sure that they're getting where they need to be. How did you get into the financial services industry? Can you just give us like a quick recap of what intrigued you and what piqued your interest?
Yeah, it really goes back to college education. I came out and did commercial real estate for 5 years out of college, had a really incredible mentor and lead in that. It was transactional work, but he was very relational in the ways in which he managed all of that. So I got to learn a lot. And the next step there was like, do you want to become a broker? And I was like, oh, heck no. I was like 2006 to 2010. So a really interesting time to be in commercial real estate, and have 2008 and 9 hit the way that it did and impact everything. And so also in my degree was finance. And I knew a few things about myself at that point. I have a lot of opinions and I like to be heard. So I'm not best in corporate environments. I'm best in more small environments. And it worked really well to align myself with one of the top people in state in retail commercial real estate. So I went to the books and found that from an independent RIA. And just was like, I believe in wealth creation. I can see it through real estate. Let me go see this from a comprehensive perspective. And found the top independent person in state at the time, and called on them for 3 months until they hired me.
Really?
Yeah.
So like, did you like physically like pick up the phone and call? Did you email? Like, what did that look like? That's
all
relentless.
of it. All of it. And then the only position available was an executive assistant. They did not choose me the first go around. They chose somebody else. That person didn't sit in that position much longer than 45 days. And I was still like hitting it and writing and calling. And so they brought me in. I was worried about coming in as an executive assistant, having sat in that position in the commercial real estate world as well. Because there's two things there. It's one of the best positions to get really educated because you have a founder's ear and their ability to mentor and teach you their ways, which is super cool. The problem is if you're really good at it, it's really hard to move out of that position, because you become such a trusted and integral part of running the business, and you have the trust of the person, the decision maker. And so I knew that going in. So I tried to be really intentional, which my intentionality actually happened through pregnancy. With my first pregnancy, I knew I would be out for leave. And so I knew I would be training somebody in an interim place. And so I actually went out and got my licensing needed to come back as an advisor while I was on leave, because I didn't want to come back as an executive assistant. Like, I had bigger dreams. And so I actually got licensed, came back, started in as a junior advisor, and then continued to work my way up from there. But it was just, that's really how I got started in wealth management. But once I was in it, I knew that that's where I was meant to be for my part of changing this world. Like, wealth can have such this level of greed and power and hurt and all of those things, but it can also have empowerment and trust and clarity and all of those things. And like, trying to push it from, maybe that power and greed to like that positive influence, and being a part of what that looked like in our world. And that's why I love serving entrepreneurs. I love our retirees too. I mean, it's so necessary, such a huge shift in life, and to see our clients through life, like truly our Destiny Capital clients are with us till, the idea is they're with us until they're gone, and then we can help that next generation. And so we see them for 30, 40, 50 years. But our entrepreneurs, they're impact multipliers, and they haven't had the same level of access to full financial planning. And so sitting there to help them find their empowerment in it, to continue job creation, to continue, creating opportunities, their reach is just beyond anybody else. And so we're really passionate about that. But that's where I started. I just kept on knocking on that door till they took
I
me.
love it. And I mean, what's great is that you kept knocking, you got the EA position. And then when you're pregnant, you're like, oh, I'm going to use this for my advantage, and I'm going to kind of work the system here.
Yeah.
How did your boss take that when you were like, hey, by the way, I got my license while I was out?
They knew that I was going to do, I think they were really surprised, and, those are things that I've carried with me. The positive things was I was very, I was very career oriented and focused on that. And I've also created systems in our own culture now that those aren't things that have to exist. Like, you don't have to give up time as a mom with your baby in those very important weeks, and also to have any fear of stepping back in your career or feeling like you need to utilize that time to step into something new. Like, you're already stepping into a lot of new. So those are things where I'm like, I'm glad that I've went through it, but I've also really worked hard to, and with our team, create a culture where there is absolutely no consequence and full encouragement to just connect with baby during that time frame.
To like completely unplug and not worry about the career. Yeah. And I was actually looking at, I love talking about culture, and I was looking at your team, and I saw that you had an annual employee scholarship fund. So what is that? How does that play into the culture of your team?
Yeah, so this is really, so we're a second generation firm, which means there was a founder before us, and he had an entire team and a leadership team that he grew with for 30 years. So we were founded in the 80s, and his son is my business partner, Jared Music, and Tim, our chief investment officer. So and part of that was that fund came out of honoring the generation before us. You get to a place where you're like, what is a good retirement gift, right? And one of those things was our previous COO. She really was connected into like the team and investing in them and just checking in on them on a day-to-day basis. And so we thought, what's more honoring than carrying that legacy forward and creating an annual scholarship in which the peers get to vote for their teammate on and asking specific questions through the year. And we create a fund for them to utilize the following year, and whether it's personal, professional development, and or an occasional investment into their self-care needs. So like through the years, we've had one that invested in becoming certified in business exit planning. And then we had another who is really working on putting that oxygen mask on herself and took her family over to Europe for the first time. And we have another who invested in a self-care coach that she got to utilize on a monthly basis, and meditation and walking through these really next steps in her life in an empowering way. And so it's super cool. We haven't put boundaries on it because we feel like all of those are really, really important. And especially being in a service advice industry, we know that it's so important that anything that's coming to our clients is being filtered through that person. And so having a whole healthy team that takes care of themselves means better advice and experience to our clients. And so that fund in itself takes on all of that, like what's going to make them feel best that year.
And so the other employees vote on who gets it the next year?
Yeah. So we do it in November, and you can nominate as many, they nominate as many peers as they would like, or as many teammates as they would like. And so it's not an easy nomination. It's like 4 questions that you really have to put some time in to share how it showed up in the year and all that. And then as a partnership team, we review those nominations and ultimately make the selection, because that's a lot on the team to try to put that on them, especially we're only a team of 13. So those are things that we really try to take into. So as a partnership team, we ultimately decide that, but it's based off of the nominations from the team.
Okay. So it's not like a popular vote.
No.
Okay.
No, especially as a team of 13, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure that wouldn't even show up very well in a bigger one. However, like we have learned over the years, like, oh my gosh, the nominations are like rewards in themselves. And like, how do we get just, that information out to anybody that was nominated? That's like, somebody thought so highly of you, and here's the things that they shared and those types of things. And it's not just the recipient of that award.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. Though I mean, I've heard of like other things, like a sabbatical if you've been with the company for a certain amount of time, and obviously health and wellness perks. That's like everywhere. Okay, not everywhere. I shouldn't say that. But like a lot of like the new tech companies, a lot of like the, startups, that's almost a given, I feel like sometimes. So you have a team of 13, you said.
Yeah.
Can you give our audience some advice on hiring? What are some mistakes you've made? How do you make sure they're a good fit culturally, skill set, personality, all of that?
Yeah. Oh man, hiring has been a journey. So I mean, as a second generation firm, there's a lot of shifting in that, right? Like you're now taking a company that existed for 30 years and now creating a whole nother mission and vision for the next 30 years. And so there's a lot of just identity and getting clear, and getting very clear on who we are, what we're doing, career pathing. We went from a lifestyle firm and we're now going into like becoming a small giant. What our mission is to serve more and be enduring. And so hiring lessons, we've had incredible hires and we've had failures. And I would say the one feedback that we get often that sets us apart from different companies is we're very clear on who we are, what we do, how we do it, and we're very clear on our values. And that has been like literally we've been told from candidate after candidate, the fact that we can answer those questions differentiates us from others, because many companies can't articulate who they are, what they do, and how they do it in a very clear way. And so we have an internal mission, which is to create an environment where our very talented people can thrive. And we use that as a measuring stick for everything. And we encourage them to utilize that. And then our external mission is to help people live a remarkable life. And so it's really around like, being able to answer those things. A big lesson was I used to be on the front of interviews and we totally pulled me. This is super interesting. I am a optimist. I am about growth and revenue, and I'm more sales oriented. which means I see possibility, opportunity, and I can make up amazing things for anybody. So if I get an interview, I'm like, oh my God, they're awesome. Like, here are all the possibilities. Here's where I can see this going. And it could even for me, like start shifting the job that we're hiring for, because I am now meeting somebody who has all of these opportunities. And that has come to, bite us in the butt a little bit, because I can find all of the good in some, and honestly, in an interview and opportunities, and I can daydream about it. And then I'm a partner of the firm, sharing that with people who are interviewing after us. And, like that doesn't help, because they're like, well, if Tiffany, likes this person, then we probably should. And versus we've now put like, what are those red flag, realists that can identify up front. And I come on that very back end to ensure that there's just like, nothing missing, and it's a cultural fit, and, they are into the mission and kind of that big energy. But that was really big, because we are very thoughtful about who we're hiring, what are those roles and responsibilities of that position. And we need to identify technical skill from a financial planning perspective. And we need to identify, team collaboration and where they're going to be falling in with who they're working with closely day to day. And then what does that look like? Like, we don't need the salesperson up front. I mean, like, oh my gosh, these are all the amazing things. And so I think that that was really important. And then if it's a different position in which we would have maybe less people internally interviewing, then I've learned to use external people. So we have some business coaches, or we have people that we've really connected to from other COOs or CEOs. And so if it's one of those like key positions that we're hiring for, we will now do external interviews where we'll ask one of them if they'd be willing to meet, because they know us well enough and they have insights into that. So part of it was like, we're feeling really insecure about making some pretty poor decisions hiring. What are ways that we can do that? Well, another way was we can ask external people who've done very well in their hiring to maybe take one of those meetings or two and help us identify it. And that's been really big in some key decision making, or identifying things that we would have not identified. We do strength finders and DISC from a personality perspective. That's helped us a lot. And then we do like technical skill, just given what we do. So they'll have like a series of questions, like how would you respond to this? Or if you see this plan, if you had to write this back, it's timed, like you need to get it back to us within 24 hours, those types of things, just to ensure that like we're getting an idea of how would they communicate to clients in these types of circumstances? How do they see that? And really alignment on, we've learned to be very, very clear on where we're at as a firm and growth timeframe. Because there are certainly been times where there's somebody looking to move maybe quicker into a position that we don't know will be available. And that catches up to you when you're like, no, I think we can get there. We can do that together. It's just really good to be like as transparent as possible on like, here's where we're at. And that's been a key feature as well, transparency in hiring. I would say that it's really important that both parties are wildly informed on truly where you're at, so that they're making very clear decisions, because that first 60 to 90 days, when there's an expectation gap or an understanding gap, it doesn't feel good for either side. So my thought going into it is to be as transparent and give them as much information as they can to make the very best decision for themselves and their family, as well as for us, so that when there's true alignment on coming in, because oftentimes when we like people, we can actually put that sales hat back on and oversell like where we're at. And then that balloon deflating in those first 90, 180 days is not the balloon that you want inflating. That should be the highest value time for an employee to come on and feel really just reaffirmed in their decision making. And so like there are times where we're like, okay, like here's where we're at as a firm, here are the things that we're experiencing. We had to go through as a second generation firm. Like I tell people, I was like, if you're coming from maybe a wirehouse where everything has been, there's a process for everything, there's technology for everything, there's an answer for everything. Like we're not that. Like we're way more on the white canvas throwing paint side of art than while we're working to add the science. And ideally over time, we're going to be 50-50. We're never going to be full science. So if you're looking for that step-by-step total support, all of those things, we're not going to be that firm. We're always going to be innovative. We're always going to be working towards serving, greater clients. We're never going to be a wirehouse. Our job is to be an independent boutique firm that is adaptable and innovative and all of that. But man, that means building and scratching and starting and breaking. And while that sounds exciting to a lot of people, like I think people learn themselves that while they love the idea of not having to sell every idea that they have and that they'll be able to take chances on it, they also don't love having to build everything from scratch or breaking things and doing that. Like they love when things just work. And so being clear about where we're at as a firm, where it's like the opportunity is here and you get to be a part of that build and creation. That's awesome. You also need to know that there's build and creation to be done. And sometimes that's going to be frustrating because it's a tad bit inefficient, right? And it's not those easy levers. And so, really think to self, where do you do your best work? What do you need to feel really good in an environment? And so it's been helpful, but those have kind of been our hiring things.
You mentioned your business partner a few times.
Yes.
Can you give us some advice on how that works well? Because I have had people on the show, multiple people on the show, where it has not worked well and has ended in failure. So it seems like it's working.
Yes.
So I'd love to have an opportunity to explore that.
Yeah.
What is some advice you have for people who are considering a business partnership? How do you make it work?
Yeah. So we get this a lot because we really truly do have a healthy partnership, and not only that, but we've been able to extend that to additional partners, and that's our goal. Like equity changes lives the same way we feel about Entrepreneur Line. We want to offer that internally. And so Jared and I connected in 2017. And so we became partners, or I was brought into the firm in 2018, became a partner shortly thereafter. We did the honeymoon stage, make sure that everything was good. And so we had built in a time frame to ensure that there would be a healthy partnership. But we are very transparent and open from the get-go. So I was very clear financially. I said, you should know personally, like where we're at, what our runways look like, our ability to invest in the business, those types of things. Like, I want to know yours, because if there's ever capital raises or anything along those lines. So we were both very transparent about where we were financially, because financial misalignment can interrupt partnership pretty quickly. I was very clear on the business finances. So anybody that's going to be a partner of ours has a long window of reviewing where the business is at, how those finances are, decision making. Decision making was a very important one because I'm not an equal partner. Jared is a majority owner, but we are equal in decision making. And that was really important because I can't be limited in the scope of work that I'm doing to grow the firm and consistently be in a place of feeling like I'm battling that, like that we have a very consistent and honoring place of leadership and decision making and those types of things. So we did decide on 50-50 decision making. And then we really keep open lines of communication. So we have a tactical meeting every week in which we go through like what are just those technical things in the business and like those really important tasks we have to hit. And then we have like a big thinking strategy once a week. And then we do quarterly offsites and those types of things. But the big thing is we're really clear on where we're at. I know like questions are, be like, oh my gosh, Jared, like I feel like I'm failing. He knows that I've had to overcome levels of people pleasing or levels of imposter syndrome or those types of things. Like he's super honest about his strengths and weaknesses. I'm super honest about mine. We're super honest about where we're at. And I think I think it's like any relationship, very open lines of communication. And then very strategic set meetings that are consistent. We have like red flag questions that we will ask just in case sometimes you learn that like you should like we actually had the intuition along the way. If only we would have stopped and asked certain questions, we probably could have foreseen some of the things that we've gone through. And it's really nice for those days where I'm like, this is so hard and I don't think I'm it. Like, I don't think I can do this, or I think that this, he can step in and be like, okay, here's where it's at, or here's how we're going to shift these spinning plates and those types of things. I actually, having now had such a solid partnership, don't know how people do it alone. I feel like if you don't have a partner, a community of entrepreneurs is so important to have, because it's just an entirely different world when your capital's at risk, your mission and everything inside of you is there, and it feels like at any given point, it's just like euphoria and total fear, and that can happen in the same minute, you know? And so having a partner really helps walk through each piece of that. Or when I'm having doubts on myself, to be like, no, here's why you're in that seat. Here's what we're going to do. Like, let's get to the real problem. It's overwhelming, how many plates are spinning? How do we set down 3 and focus on 2? Those types of things.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because that goes back to mindset and, growing this business to 7 figures.
Yeah.
Was there any work you had to do on yourself specifically that maybe your partner didn't help with as much to get through the imposter syndrome, the fear, the doubt, all of that?
Totally. I think, something about our culture is, I think everyone is pretty invested into self-work, and we certainly nurture that as a culture. But yeah, before I met him, and joined Destiny Capital, I was doing that type of work. Stephanie Bogan was a private coach of mine, and we started on mindset. I was out there in a total business development seat, failing at marketing, and I had 2 small kids, and I was in a pregnancy, and I just needed money, and I just lost self in such a big way. But I invest in a self-care coach. I've done, and I say that because it's a little bit different than maybe a life coach, and it's a little bit different than just like total health, but there was a level of, therapy, meditation. There was a level of just self-nurturing, learning how to take those breaks and pauses. I am not like a lot of people in the fact that like I can just read books. Jared, my business partner, reads a ton of books, and so does our other partner, Tim. They read a lot of books, take those pauses, put things in practice that way. They listen to a lot of podcasts. I am very like, how do I connect human to human, and where am I going to get those moments? So I rely on my people. And so I've chosen and learned to choose the right people where I can go and refill and or get my needs addressed as well, where there's a reciprocal piece of not just giving, but also receiving, those types of things. But my self-care coach, Gargi's her name. She's amazing. I tell people you get verbed by her, like you get Gargied. But a lot of that was just a level of like pause out of the business, brain breaks, learning how to quiet my mind, those types of things. And then over time, what I love about coaching is I've been coached. I at any given point, I'll invest in different coaches. Sometimes I need it from a business perspective because I'm looking to level up there. Sometimes I need it from a human perspective. Sometimes I need it from a physical perspective and moving my body. So I'll kind of sway in where I'm investing those self dollars. But what I love about coaching is that even though all of these things can stir up, right? Like imposter syndrome doesn't just go away. It can hit at any given point and all those things, but I have tools and strategies now to know that that's coming in. And instead of reeling for 2 weeks on it, or 3 weeks, and or living in a place of making decisions based off of living in that imposter syndrome, I can like quiet it, I can address it, I can combat it. So that my brain has different ways to hold on and not believe that, so that I can get into the place of making good decisions and feeling really clear and taking those next steps. So those are, I 100% believe in coaching. I 100% believe in the importance of my time and where that can be spent. And I invest in it based off of whatever my needs are in that moment. And a lot of grace, because I remind myself often, but this is my first time. a lot of times I'm making decisions for the first time ever, and I'm doing my darndest with the best to do that. And I'm just not going to get it right all the time. And at first, as an entrepreneur, that really got to me. But now I'm like, okay, like that roller coaster is just a little bit less, and I can handle those highs and lows. And being aware, I like to say I'm a recovering people pleaser. The imposter syndrome doesn't flare up near as much as it used to. And when it does, I feel okay and in flow with that. And you know, some of that self-worth stuff, as a salesperson for a long time in my life, numbers really mattered. Like they were self-worth numbers, right? You see what's on the fridge or how it's being displayed in your office, or you're looking at the P&L and you're like, those numbers are reflecting my self-worth. Like, and I've learned that as a human, we're worthy, and those numbers are just feedback for decision making. It has nothing to do with me. It has the opportunity to take that information and do something different with it. But for a really long time, my P&L defined who I was. And I think that is a really unhealthy relationship to have. So I've worked really hard on, you know, self-worth and imposter syndrome and people pleasing, especially as a leader. People pleasing is not a awesome place to be when you have to make really hard have hard people conversations and decisions. So had to work on that.
What do you think is one of the biggest mistakes you've made with your business partner, or even you as you've grown this business?
Biggest mistakes. We like to say that we pay tuition. We pay tuition to a lot of courses and lessons that we don't want to take again. And at least if we pay that tuition, and we take that lesson, then it was a worthy mistake, because it's essentially moving us to the future. But I would say, you know, there isn't a ton, like, honestly, like there's been some huge things where you're like, oh my gosh, like, you know, a mishire that was just culturally not a fit, and you can see the impact of that so fast for everybody. And that one was hard. Like that one was really hard for us as a firm. And I'm so glad we did that as early as we did in our business, and that didn't happen 10 years down the road with just even a wilder impact. You know, those types of things. It happened in the right time. We've marketed things in a general way that created confusion, and so learning, you know, how to communicate and message in a really important way. Like those are all really big lessons, but and big mistakes. But I feel so, I don't know, I'm just in a place of like, they're just a part of it. And as long as we take that tuition, and by God, Jared and I should probably do our calculating on that, but guaranteed we've made at least $500,000 of just really bad and, you know, like really mistake investments. I paid for a really expensive website for Entrepreneur Aligned. We're in the midst of redoing it. It'll launch here soon. But that first one, like, and it's all a piece of it while you're learning how to message and do those things, but it's not a conversion tool. It's a piece of artwork, which is like totally, you know, great that it's pretty and it has some really great words on it. Websites are meant to be conversion tools where they talk to your target audience to get them to take action. Well, it's missing those pieces. Literally, I run marketing and growth. Like that is something that I should have been very aware of. And as a firm, we invested a solid amount. And so I tell people now all the time, like the first thing you do in a website is it's a conversion tool. It's the opportunity to get in front of whoever it is that you need, whether that's a product or client or, you know, those types of things. So if you start with that, then you learn. But those are all massive mistakes that have either we've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars into, or we've missed hundreds of thousands of dollars of opportunities. And we're still
And you've
here.
survived. Yeah.
We're doing great work. We really take those lessons in. I think we've adopted a really good culture of taking chances and knowing that our mistakes don't define us. Like, you know, it's how we respond to them and how we take them in and those types of things. And that's really, really important. I mean, how many times in our careers have we just panicked making mistakes and going in, or having the boss that, like, you know, publicly humiliates you and doesn't take any responsibilities for those mistakes, versus being like, okay, well, we're human and we're going to make these mistakes. Like we've misprioritized things. Like in switching from that first generation to the second generation, we got into a place of my job is to get out there and grow. And I'm like, we're going to grow, we're going to grow, we're going to grow. Well, we built this team that doesn't have the systems, it was built to serve an advisor historically, and everybody in there was built to serve him and make sure that he could show up in a really great way to the clients. Well, now we're building this really differently and we didn't have all those systems identified. Well, growth is amazing, and growth also magnifies every breakdown that you'll have. So you have to be really thoughtful about that. So, we slowed down to speed up, and we got into a place of like operational excellence will deliver us in a really great way. And so we're going to take a step back, ensure all promises that we make as a firm can be delivered, and then we're going to create that capacity to grow. That's really hard. Like it's really hard, especially as somebody who works through numbers defining meaning, both for self and business, working through like growth solves everything, right? Like, oh, well, we'll just fix it. More revenue through the door, we'll just fix it. Like, we had to learn to slow down and know that not all revenue fixes everything. In fact, new revenue can exacerbate things in a way that makes it really unhealthy for everybody. And you're putting a lot at risk. Brand reputation, your own reputation, your entire client experience. And I got to tell you, with wealth management, like it's not something we're ever willing to do. So we quickly, pulled back and made sure that we can deliver on all of that while we're becoming the firm of the future, because we're not ever willing to compromise on the services when our client's net worth is in our hands. It's a big deal.
So kind of piggybacking on that, what advice do you have for other women as they want to grow their business and try to reach 7 figures from where they are now?
Yeah. So a big thing is trust your intuition. I'm sure you get that often, but like we are in our seat, and like learning to trust ourselves is good. And then grace for the mistakes, because it's not that your intuition or gut was wrong. It's that there's something you were doing it for the first time, right? So allow yourself that grace to learn that. And are you in the seat to respond and move it forward and take that next step? Also, the first time I just massively believe in micro community or community, like not doing this alone. Connect. There's so many organizations, and if not, there's just so many ways to connect with other entrepreneurs. I have women entrepreneur groups. I have part of larger organizations that we're a part of for entrepreneurship. And I'm like, we're all out there looking to do our best, and we have things to share with one another. And so I look to take in the tuition that other people have paid so we don't have to make it. So I think the biggest thing that we can do in trying to get there and running our businesses is creating that micro community that we consistently give and receive from, because it's going to help us grow our businesses in a really impactful way.
That was great. Micro communities. I haven't heard that before. Micro communities. Write that down. Where can we find you? Share with us your website that we can put in the show notes. If you have any kind of social links, that would be helpful as well. So other women can connect with you if they have any questions or want to reach out.
Absolutely. I'm most active on LinkedIn from a personal perspective. So you can find me there. We have Entrepreneur Aligned both on LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter. But if you're looking for really good content that just talks about every pillar of financial success, it's out there. We put it out weekly. And so we're really excited and proud of the information that we're giving away that will help just big thinking and important financial pieces to get yourself in a really good place to be so available to yourself and your business. And so those are good places to connect. And the website certainly has contact information and all of that as well.
Where do you find that with the pillars that you were saying? Is that on LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's in our content. So so we put out weekly content in our Entrepreneur Weekly Digest.
Okay.
And so it has any core components of those financial pillars.
Okay. Thank you. What is one philosophy, mantra, or quote you try to run your business by?
This, as I mentioned, I'm in a growth seat. But and this has been shared. Steph Bogan really implemented this in my life, and a couple other coaches, but cost is only an issue in the absence of value. I think about that all the time and really think about how that shows up in our team and their experience. And listen, competitive salary is really important. But there's research out there that says, 20 to 25% of that, like from like people will probably leave if it's comp is more than 20-25% more than you're offering. But like when you think of the value as in culture and what you can deliver and all of those things, like, but certainly from a servicing business, like anytime there's any sort of friction with a client, like fees are an easy thing for clients to bring up, but that's because there's some level of absence of value. So we can go in there. There are people that charge next to nothing for wealth management, and there are people that charge $100,000 a year, and they're clients for everything. And it's not that they're necessarily in different, well, they maybe a little bit differently demographically, but like for the most part, like it's what are they willing to value and what does that look like? So I think about that a lot in running our business. Like cost is only an issue in the absence of value. When we're looking at expenses and we're having friction with technology or vendors or investments, like it's easy for us to be like, God, it costs so much, but I'm like, well, why? Like, what value is it not delivering, or what value is it delivering? And it's in service of what and at the cost of what, in any sort of anything that we're doing. But I love that line. I feel like it's just applied in a lot, and I think about it often.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for joining me on this interview, Tiffany.
Yes.
I really appreciate it. And I think our audience is going to love this advice too that you gave. I know I kind of went off a lot of the questions. We had a lot of questions planned that I didn't get to, but
That's okay.
I think it was worth it because there was so much good advice in what you gave us. And if you're a part of our audience and listening to this show, and if you found it informative, valuable, and whatever Tiffany said really spoke to you and resonated with you, please do us a favor and help grow the show by sharing it with someone else who will also find it valuable. So until next time, you can find me on LinkedIn or you can tag me on Instagram at virtually Curie. And please sign up for our newsletter where you'll get exclusive content from Tiffany.